Good morning, and thank you for joining us in this celebration of the life of Dr. Carla Lowry. Looking out, I see many of her friends, many of her friends. I wasn't quite expecting such a wonderful turnout. But I see her friends from Berry Creek, from the University of Texas at Austin, from Southwestern University. I see golfing friends, basketball friends, friends from academia, friends from her past. The common theme is that we were all her friend, and we have come together this morning to honor a very, very special person. I doubt that you can miss the fact that this celebration of her life is taking place not only in the Robertson Center, which is the house that Carla built, but also on a basketball court, an area 94 feet long and 50 feet wide, which from the time she was a young girl growing up in Mississippi was one of the true passions of her life. It is fitting also that we do this in the shadow of a basketball goal, which represents the hours that Carla's known in her playing days as Shorty. Not quite sure how she got that name, but she spent perfecting her trademark hook shot. She lived a life of dedication to her job and good times with her family and friends. At this time, I would like to invite our former chaplain at Southwestern University, and who was also Carla's neighbor, the Reverend Dr. Beverly Jones, to come forward to share more of Carla's life through the reading of her eulogy and to offer some words of comfort to all of us.
I cannot begin to make my remarks this morning without extending on Dot's behalf deep thanksgiving for your presence here and deep appreciation to Dr. Munt and to her staff for the thoughtfulness and care to detail that they have made in putting together this service. It is an expression not only of doing their jobs and doing them well, but an expression of love in Carla's memory, an expression of their support for Dot. Heartfelt thanks go to the Autumn Leaves and to Harbor Hospice for their compassionate care during her last months, weeks, and days of her life. Carla celebrated her birthday at Autumn Leaves on July 17th with friends and with the staff and Dot. She was under hospice care. Dot shared with me how on that day she was exceptionally animated. She was able to join in the celebration in a remarkable way given her decline. Carla started telling some story, Dot said, and while no one else could quite make out her words, which were on the decline, Carla started laughing. And then she kept laughing and laughing and laughing. She was so tickled she couldn't stop. Whatever it was, she was able to have such fun on that day, on her birthday. Such an expression of the trust and care that Carla felt in the midst of those who were caring for her. Carla had two sisters, Lee, a psychiatrist, now deceased, and Louise Lawrence of Ethelsville, Alabama, who couldn't be here. But facing her own health issues, she yet came out and visited Carla and Dot in May and early June for a week, visiting, meeting friends, neighbors, of course, Carla's caregivers. I talked with Louise on the phone yesterday, and she too expresses such thanks for such great love expressed to Carla. I'm thankful to Louise, who is willing to share with me a little bit more about Carla and her sister's experiences in childhood and family life. And thank you to Dot, who sat down with me and shared about their life together, that insider's take on Carla that only a life partner can make. For any gaps or mistakes on my part, I ask your forgiveness. Carla Estelle Lowry was born July 17, 1939, to Horace and Catherine Lowry in Washington, D.C., where her father was a lawyer. She was the third of three girls, Louise and Lee being her older sisters. They moved to the small town of Forest, Mississippi in 1941. Her father's work would take him to Nashville and to Knoxville, Tennessee as a lawyer and lobbyist for the Republican Party. That may not be so unique these days, but in the 1940s, to be a Republican sure was. It wasn't so popular to think of FDR as a communist in those days, as Mr. Lowry thought, and as Dot put it, there were only about 3 Republicans in the whole state. He ran for governor, but of course, no surprise, he lost. The girls would spend several summers in Knoxville with their dad, where he lived in a hotel. Living in a hotel left a stamp in Carla's mind, for when she would go visiting to her friends' houses, she would walk through the front door and look around, and she'd go, "Oh, you have such a pretty lobby." On a trip to Knoxville decades later, Carla would show Dot the swimming pool she remembered swimming in as a child, commenting on how small it seemed and how big it was when she swam there. She told of her many childhood experiences in Knoxville, including how the children would play in a cemetery nearby, the grassy open spaces inviting to children, no doubt. They made friends with other children of families living in Knoxville. It was wartime. Many of the children were from families who had service members serving. They often met together at a nearby restaurant, Regis Restaurant, and they served 3 meals a day. When the food ration coupons ran out, people gathered. The hotel wasn't far from Southern Railroad Depot. Sister Louise remembers how from time to time the war trains would go by. One train held German prisoners being transported to barracks in another part of the state. Carla had seen how the Germans used the Hail Hitler salute, and she gave it to them as they passed by on the train. Of course, her mother was terrified that they were going to get in big, big trouble, but they didn't. And one of the prisoners who caught Carla saluting gave a crisp American salute back. The girls were in Knoxville when World War II ended, whistles and horns blowing, people out in the streets, and confetti flying everywhere. At the end of the summers, they would return to Forest to go back to school and be on with their yearly life. Louise shared that Carla always had a calm personality. She was a favorite in the family. The 2 older sisters were brass and brazen, she said, but Carla was always much more mild and low-key. She had that way of being able to accomplish what she wanted to do, but without offending anyone else. Carla's dad had sports talent, playing sports himself as a young man, and he realized Carla's athletic talent when she was quite small. She could throw a softball underhanded, not a natural or easy feat for a 5-year-old. Her father died from a heart attack when Carla was 9, Lee was 10, Louise was 12. The doctor said he had a strained heart and began to have trouble. 1933 and 1944, having several heart attacks, and then dying in 1948 of that fatal attack. At that point, her mother had been raising the children and caring for her own ailing father and, of course, her husband in those years. But after her husband's passing, she went to work. She worked for the Gossard Corset Company, kept her on the road traveling. Her own mother took over as the caregiver for the 3 girls. The girls lived up on the second floor of their home. Grandma lived on the first. With the freedom of their own floor, they had a grand time. Of course, it created a special bond for those sisters, and they invited friends all over for what Louise called donut parties. They would bring in dozens of donuts and just have a wonderful old time up there. If the noise got too loud, the grandma would take her broom handle and bang on the ceiling, asking them to quiet down. Carla and the others all had their chores to do. Carla was the breakfast cook, her sisters taking lunch and dinner. They lived 3 blocks from the church and 4 blocks from school, and sometimes they happily caught a ride from one of the neighborhood moms. It was a safe, small town where everyone knew everyone. Carla always sought out the sports opportunities, playing tennis on a local tennis court, even on the hottest days in the summer, with her grandmother saying she would surely get a sunstroke for doing that. And Carla was an adventurer as a child and young person. She was unaware of the dangers of her exploits sometime. She went to the Gresham Railroad cross-tie yard, climbed all over those creosote-covered railings, playing on mounds of sawdust, completely unaware of the risk of falling in, getting buried, and even smothering. Her grandmother had a friend around the corner whose grandson had come for a visit, and this shows her early commitment to women's equality. The little boy had been invited to come over and play with the girls. He said, "I don't want to play with girls." The girls caught wind of that comment, and when his grandmother brought him over into their yard, they took him, and they took him through barbed wire, crossing across the barn, scrounging in the dirt, and when he came home after playing, dirty, shirt-torn, minor cuts, his grandma said, "I thought you weren't going to play with any girls." He said, "Them girls ain't sissies." Carla was always good with animals, cats and dogs. Her sister Louise shared that when they were kids, when Carla was very young, she would dance with a tall yellow tomcat. She was the only person that cat would ever let get close to him. On the other hand, she said her father had a bunch of long white leghorn chickens. They were very wild, and Carla was the only one who could fight off the rooster to keep from bothering those hens. Louise commented she was so talented in so many ways, and with her love for animals, she would have made a good veterinarian. Certainly, she brought those skills of relationship into all that she would do. In terms of pets, Dot shared how Carla had a cat named Goodbye when they first moved in together. Dot said it was the ugliest cat, and she showed me a picture, and it looked like a rat. It didn't look like a cat. Carla told Dot that she was the pick of the litter. Was probably pretty old already and wouldn't last very long. The cat lived another 10 years. Of course, Carla loved her dachshunds, Dory and Tootsie. Dot shared with me also that a man from her childhood called last week to express his sympathies. He had been a classmate of Carla's from first grade all the way through 12th. He had played boys basketball, and Carla, of course, had played girls. The coach in town wanted to make a difference, and he went down to the telephone company and asked for a phone pole. They gave it to him. He cut out a backboard from some old wood, stuck it in the ground at Carla's house. That's where they played ball. That's where Carla learned basketball. It was her basketball coach who would see the article in Parade magazine in the newspaper, an article about the Flying Queens at Wayland Baptist College, encouraging Carla to apply there. Being a person who wasn't going to wait for the world to come to her, Carla wrote the coach about a tryout, and she got by herself on the bus from Forest, Mississippi, and rode it all the way to Plainview, Texas. She had her tryout and was one of only 2 students to receive a scholarship to play for the Flying Queens. She was 17 years old. She became, as you know, an elite All-American basketball player, leading their teams in 1957 to 1961. She was a part of the now historic Flying Queens' 131 consecutive wins in 1953 to 1958. Carla led her team to the AAU championships in 1959 and 1961. The Basketball Hall of Fame in Knoxville recognized these Wayland Baptist players and Carla as trailblazers of the game in 2013. Their story was written up in Texas Monthly, and I found online that there's a film documentary in the works now about their story. Carla earned a 1959 Pan American Games gold medal and represented the United States in Russia with the U.S. Department of Cultural Exchange program. But Carla, always humble and self-effacing and always looking for the next thing in her life, when Dot asked her about what it was like to be over there in Russia and what it was like to play on that team, She said, "Oh, it was a good experience." But she didn't say much about it. She said, "Oh, that all happened in another life." I asked Dot if she ever saw her play basketball, and she said when she was quite young, and she said, "Oh, once or twice, she and some of her friends had heard the Flying Queens were going to be in a town nearby, and they all jumped in the car to go see the team play." She remembers being impressed by Carla. She could make a hook shot with either hand. Dot and Carla were both at TWU at the same time later, but they didn't really get to know each other even then. It would be later, after moving to this area, that they would meet. Carla graduated with a Bachelor of Arts degree from Wayland in 1961, went on to earn a master's in 1963, and then her doctorate in 1972 from Texas Women's University. Her doctoral dissertation explored and addressed the issues of leadership theory through the study of women's intercollegiate sports groups. She authored 2 books on basketball and published numerous research articles. Carla had a spirituality and faith. She had grown up in the church in Mississippi, probably who couldn't, and Dot gave me a copy of her dissertation, and it begins with this marvelous introduction with biblical allusion of that first chapter of Genesis in creation. And rather than calling God, God, she calls God the leader. Carla first began teaching at Kincaid High School in Houston in 1963. She coached Texas AIAW state championship teams in basketball and volleyball. She didn't know that much about volleyball, but as you remember, there weren't many women's leaders in sports at that time. She taught at Sam Houston State University. After receiving her doctorate, she was also graduate assistant to the basketball team at TWU. She moved to University of Texas at Arlington to teach physical education, 1972, and she earned the Amico Foundation Teaching for Excellence Award in 1975. In 1984, Carla would leave UT Arlington to become the athletic director of Southwestern University and a tenured professor, finally, in kinesiology. She stayed here until her retirement in 2001. She was the first woman to serve as athletic director at Southwestern, and no doubt faced the skepticism of some and the support of others as she came into that role. Jim Mallon was one of those original skeptics, and in his grumpiness, those of you who knew him told Glada she better be good. She was good, and it wasn't long before Carla won Mallon over, and of course, they became the best of friends. Carla was a pro. She was kind and smart and had a good sense of humor and a good sense of people. She did the heavy lifting to help see her coaching staff through the implementation of the decision to have Southwestern move from NAIA scholarship athletics to Division III of the NCAA. No easy feat that required endless conversations that she guided by wisdom and appreciation for challenge and respect for her colleagues. She oversaw the expansion of Southwestern's athletic program and, as Glada pointed out, was the main mover behind the building of the Robertson Center. I arrived on campus in 1995, just after the construction of this building was complete, though the sidewalks and seating weren't yet done. There were still mud and boards all around the building and the campus. I remember her welcoming me with a broad smile that she seemed to always have. When she learned that I was house hunting and considering a garden home at Berry Creek, she immediately invited me over to see her home, to get the lay of the land, driving me around on her golf cart. I moved in 20 years ago this month and have been so appreciative not only to have had Carla as a colleague, but Carla as my neighbor and friend. She included me also in the work of her work. By the time I came, she had been appointed as the Director of Wellness and Leisure and Associate Dean. And when I was looking for some office space, which was very limited, that would be more accessible to students, she said, "Come on over, let's walk around." So I walked up from my office in the boonies, and she took me on a tour of this building and found a closet that was full of athletic equipment. And it was pretty big. And she said, "What do you think about this?" I said, "It'd be great." And she worked to make 2 offices out of that space, welcoming. She always did what she could to help someone else find their way. A spirit of, let's get it done. Let's find a doable solution, even to some of the most frustrating problems. She never wanted to limit the success of her students, colleagues, or the university as a whole. She wanted them to succeed. As Dot put it, sometimes she lived out of a different worldview than some of us, and I remember that sometimes her ideas and the way she got at things came from kind of a little different angle, different logic, but it always came from a good mind and a caring heart. She welcomed and mentored so many students, instructors, professors, coaches along the way, inviting them to come into their own, using their gifts to strengthen their contributions in their own chosen endeavors. She stood by her convictions and made not only countless contributions to women's sports by being a leader in women's athletics, but she was personal in the way she did it. A mentor, a guide, a listener, a teacher, a professor, coach, and friend. She was so even-keeled. Dot shared how her own fuse is about that long, but Carla's never seemed to ever get lit. She just didn't get mad. And when she did get mad and say, "I'm really, really mad," I go, "You were mad? You looked so calm. You looked like you were having a good time." She could be assertive in working with people, but never offensive, always graceful, with sparkling eyes, helping to create a bridge. These were all qualities, of course, that helped her to succeed with her colleagues and student staff and endeared her to so many friends. She served as president and played so many other roles in professional associations, and even after retirement, being involved out at Berry Creek, informal and formal, always understanding the power of good leadership coming right from who one is, right from their heart. As I thought about what kind of passage from Scripture might fit Carla's life, because she wasn't a preacher and she didn't talk about religion so much, but I couldn't help but see this passage is the one I wanted to share. If I speak in the tongues of people and of angels but have not love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have prophetic powers to understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have faith to remove mountains but have not love, I am nothing. If I give away all that I have, and if I deliver my body to be burned but have not love, I gain nothing. And this is so Carla. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love is not jealous or boastful. It is not arrogant or rude. Love does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It doesn't rejoice at the wrong, but rejoices in the right. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. As for prophecies, they will pass away. As for tongues, they will cease. For knowledge, it too will pass away. For our knowledge is imperfect, and our prophecy is imperfect. But when the perfect does come, the imperfect will pass away. When I was a child, I spoke and I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. But when I grew up, I gave up my childish ways. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall understand fully, even as I have been fully understood. So faith, hope, and love abide, these three, but the greatest of these is love. The world will be less because Carla is not here, but the world is far greater because she was. Thanks be to God for Carla Lowry.
Thank you, Beverly. I remember that cat. Goodbye was one ugly cat, and I love cats. Over the past week, we've heard so many wonderful and funny memories of Carla, and this morning we've asked some very special people in Carla's life to share their thoughts and memories. First, I would like to invite Linda Lowry. Linda's in the program is listed as an athletic director, but she was also an outstanding volleyball coach, and our history goes way back. We coached against each other many, many years, and when we were coaching, because they were such good friends with Carla, I wasn't ever quite sure who Carla was rooting for, me or Linda out there. So, but at this time, I would invite Linda to come and share some thoughts.
I remember that cat also. And I don't like cats, but I love dogs. Please let me start by saying tonight, thanks for giving me this opportunity. I know what you're thinking, don't mess it up, and I'll try not to. I first met Carla in 1967 when I was a freshman at Sam Houston State, and she had just been hired there to teach and coach both basketball and volleyball teams. Not quite sure that they knew who they had hired at that time, because they were in for a lot of work and a lot of surprises. It was a time in sport when not a lot of young women were always applauded or appreciated for competing in sports. If you had that passion to play and compete, you would do almost anything to make it happen. I once heard Carla say that while she was at Wayland, she wanted to play so much that she would have even paid them for that opportunity. I know and felt that way. Her first year at Sam, she quickly established a sense of confidence and pride in our programs, and consequently built successful and winning programs at the institution. If you were an athlete, you always wanted to play for Carla's teams. Now, I know most of you in this crowd are basketball people, and I hope you don't hold it against me, but I did play volleyball for her. Trust me, if my high school had sponsored a girls' basketball team, I would have played basketball also. There were no media guys or internet during those years, so we really didn't know much about our new coach or everything that she really had accomplished to that point. It was a surprise to me to find out years later when she admitted to a group of people that she really knew nothing about volleyball. That explained when I reflected back to some of our practices. Early on practices consisted of volleying volleyballs into basketball hoops, doing tip-like drills like jump sets on the backboards, and doing star and weave drills, volleying and passing volleyballs. One day we walked into practice and noticed there was no volleyball net up. We thought we had the wrong practice time. She said, "Oh no, y'all come on in the gym, I've got a new drill for you, for warm-up." She said, "Line up on the end line in 3 lines with volleyballs in the hands of the middle people." Well, if you're a basketball person, you know what that means. We proceeded to do full court figure eights up and down the court many, many times, volleying volleyballs. That was our warm-up. The highlight of our practices was actually getting to serve and spike over a real volleyball net by the end of practice. Whatever, it seemed to work. That first year, we had a pretty diverse group of teammates. We had some leaders, we had some followers, we had some young complainers, and we had one upperclassman that when she spoke her own mind, and everybody really stood back and listened. Well, one day after practice, this group left the gym, and we needed to get to the cafeteria before it closed. Along the way, one of the young complainers mumbled to the group saying, "You know those are basketball drills that we're doing in the gym, don't you?" Well, it didn't take long, and the upperclassman stepped in, and she, that one that spoke her own mind, stopped the group and said, "Look, if no one's noticed by now, we've won all of our matches this year, and we've won every tournament that we've gone to. So I don't care what kind of drill she's having us do. Coach says do them, so we're going to keep doing them. Does everybody understand? End of topic. Now let's go eat. I'm hungry." We hurried off. We won the state tournament that year. In the 2 short years that Carla was there, she set a very high standard for those 2 competitive programs. After each season, she would write a handwritten letter to all the players where she congratulated us on the season and how much she really appreciated our work. Those letters were so important to me as an 18-year-old that I kept and still have them. When I started teaching and coaching, I would always pull out one of those letters, reread it, and design my own letter to my own teams because I wanted to recreate that same feeling that I had felt. Now, I have to admit, after 38 years of coaching, I didn't write that letter every year because not every one of those teams was fun or deserving of a Carla-like letter. Carla was always doing some little something for somebody else. Many of you can probably think of occasions when that was true for you or you witnessed it. Before she left Huntsville, she gave me this little book of funny baby expressions. Must have been popular back then. I don't quite remember the story behind this subject, but I suppose she thought I needed something to laugh about. She wrote in the back a couple of lines. I was visiting on the phone the other day with an old teammate and still close friend of mine. She reminded me of the time that Carla was concerned about her grades. This, of course, was before academic advisors. She told my friend to bring her textbook of that particular class that she was struggling in and to meet her in the office, to bring it to her on that Friday and meet her in the office on Monday. Over that weekend, Carla highlighted and outlined every chapter that was supposed to be on that next test. And then she instructed my friend on how to study her outline. My friend will never forget this kind gesture, even though we knew behind this gesture was Carla's motive not to lose one of her star volleyball players to grades. As the years went on, she always took the time and effort to keep up with me and many others. She was always interested in knowing how I was doing, what I was doing, and she rarely talked about herself. When I applied for the head volleyball position at the University of Texas in 1978, she sent me a copy of her own resume for an example and wrote a 2-page detailed letter explaining to me what mine should include and how it should look. In the late 80s and 90s, early 90s, we often traveled to NAIA conventions with our individual jobs, and we'd meet up in meetings, dinners, and sometimes even golf. I think she volunteered for almost every committee that would ever have her because she was always interested in the advancement of sport, in particular women's sport. Carla was always caring and kind, but also very fun-loving. She loved to laugh. She was never afraid to even laugh at herself. She probably never met a stranger and would strike up a conversation with anyone. She was highly intelligent, but still had a great sense of humor. She wrote and published an article in the 1965-66 AFER magazine entitled "Fundamentals plus Fun equals Skill." Another one of her many writings was a 1978 published article in Coaching Women's Athletics entitled Confessions of a Teenage Hooker. Of course she was referring to the basketball hook shot that she was even famous for. Now, what woman in the 70s would have came up with a title like that if she hadn't had a lot of confidence in herself and that great sense of humor? She gave me a copy of that back then, and I hid it in my closet for years for fear that someone would think I was reading up on hookers. She was a great leader that set high standards for herself as well as others. Like many of you, I loved Carla. She influenced and touched so many lives in her own special way. I'll always be grateful for what she gave me and what she gave to others.
Thank you, Linda. I still haven't figured out how two volleyball coaches got to be such good friends with Carla. I'm not sure that she ever really forgave me for loving volleyball over basketball. I do know that she went with me one year that our team was at the national championship, the NAIA national championship, and we were doing quite well. And we were about to upset the University of Hawaii at Hilo, the defending national champions. And this was a big thing because nobody east of California had ever beat a Hawaiian team. And so everybody was gathering around, everybody's looking. And I look up in the bleachers, this is at the University of Milwaukee, and I look up in the bleachers, and Carla has her back to the court, and she is looking at the match on the other side. And I'm thinking, I cannot believe this. She is not even watching as we're about to beat the University of Hawaii at Hilo. And so I was so mad, so the match is over with, and we won. We were excited, I went up to Carla, and I go, Carla, I can't believe you weren't even watching the match. And she goes, Glada, I was so nervous I couldn't watch. And so I figured out, okay, she was a little bit of a volleyball fan. So we had converted her. Linda, you and I had converted her. But our next speaker personifies the University of Texas Longhorns and Burnt Orange. But she's always been a great friend of Southwestern University, and I think primarily due to Carla. But Jody, I'm gonna let out a little secret that you used to be a volleyball coach, because I coached against Jody. But I'd like to welcome Jody Conrad.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The last time I spoke about Carla was less than 3 years ago. She was inducted into the Hall of Honor here at this great university. And we shared remembrances, we shared laughs, we shared memories. And many of those flooded back into my mind over the last few days and weeks. And I think as I looked at the remarks in the program, everywhere that Carla went, you could add a little footnote and say, Jody Conrad followed. Jody Conrad followed at Sam Houston State University. Jody Conrad followed at the University of Texas at Arlington. And those times were great times. They were quite different, as we've heard already, in terms of women's sports. But they were special times because there were times where you had a bond with people who had the same passion, who had the same goals and the same aspirations that you had. And yes, Linda, I'm well aware that those of you that were at Sam Houston State, and there are others in the audience, y'all thought Carla knew everything. Volleyball and otherwise. I think at one point I had to say, I understand that I will never be able to fill Carla Lowry's shoes, but I have some shoes of my own. And those times were special. And just to give a little context, When I went to Sam Houston, and I'm certain it was because Carla Lowry was moving on and she recommended me for the job, I agreed to coach 3 sports, teach 7 activity classes, and get paid less than $10,000. So why do you do that? You do it because you love it. You do it because you've had an opportunity to grow up loving sport and being a part of a team, and the camaraderie and the closeness and the life skills that you practice in those environments motivate you to provide those same opportunities for other young women. I went to Arlington to become the athletic director, and again, I gave up coaching one sport and gave up those classes and got a chance again to work with Carla as we established a volleyball and a basketball program. And Carla was quite different than I was in terms of demeanor on the bench. She was always the calm, encouraging voice. I was a little more intense, but we had some great opportunities to move forward. My history with Carla goes way back, and some of you in this audience will appreciate this as well. When I grew up in Goldthwaite, Texas, population 1,300, 22 people in my graduating class, I played basketball. I thought I was pretty good. And there was only one opportunity to play basketball after high school at the collegiate level, and that was at Wayland Baptist College. And there were 12 or 13 scholarships that those young women had at Wayland. And as you already heard, Carla had one of those. I thought, oh, I'll never be able to do that, but wouldn't it be great to have an opportunity to play on that team? And as fate would have it, as I finished my high school career, an all-star team was assembled. And we were going to go to Brownwood, which was a metropolis at that point in time. And we were going to play Wayland Baptist University. And I thought, oh, wow, this is going to be great. I could use this as a tryout. Maybe people will see me play in this game, the coach will like what I do, and maybe I'll get a chance to go there. It didn't happen that way. As I remember, the all-star team scored 13 points. That team that was on that 131 straight game win, we did not break that record. And I do remember Carla. And I was also shocked when I got to know Carla later, and I couldn't believe it. I chuckled when I saw that her nickname was Shorty, because I thought she was 6'5" after playing against her. But that was my first contact with Carla Lowry. Go forward. Years later, I'm at Sam Houston following in her footsteps. I moved to UTA. Carla is now moving a little to the more academia, and I'm stuck as a coach. But it was a wonderful time. Carla and I sat on that bench, and there was an opportunity for us to basically start a basketball program. We took some volleyball players that were very talented and tried to teach them just the opposite, Linda. We were trying to teach them to play basketball. And after a couple of years, we had a little bit of success. But by this time, other universities across the country were also giving scholarships. And not only was Wayland in another league by themselves, we now could talk about Stephen F. Austin University. They were very good. They were giving scholarships, and they were having a lot of success. And Carla and I established a basketball team, and we played Stephen F. Austin 3 times during that year, and they beat us badly. As you might imagine, we weren't to their level. And each time we would lose, and we would move on and try to get better. And the structure was so different at that point. You played a state tournament. If you won state, then you got to go to a regional. And it was a big deal because regional was in Magnolia, Arkansas. And I didn't mention, did you, that if you had a car, you made these teams because we needed your car to go to the games. So I talked, and Carla had moved away from the team at this point, but I talked her into going on this trip with us for encouragement. And when I saw the draw of the tournament, we had a first round game, and we were in the same quadrant as Stephen F. Austin. So if we won our first game, we were going to have to play Stephen F. Austin for the fourth time that year. So it looked like our fate and our postseason play was going to be pretty short. So we go to Magnolia, Arkansas, and I don't remember who we played in the first round, but we won, and now we're poised to play Stephen F. Austin. Stephen F. Austin was very good and very confident, so they didn't bother coming the day before the game. They were going to drive up the day that they were going to play UTA and then remain at the tournament and move forward to win it. So Carla and I decided, all right, we're probably going home after this game, so why don't we go ahead and check out of our hotel room, because we're on a limited budget. We don't need to spend any extra money on hotels. So let's check out of our rooms, and we're carrying $200 in cash. Well, it's not very safe to carry that kind of money around, so let's pay for those hotel rooms with that cash. So I think our team probably figured out that we weren't real confident, because they packed their bags, we got in the car, and we go to the gym. We play the game, and would you believe we win? So now we have no hotel rooms, we have no money, and we are stuck. Our good friend Sue Gunter was coaching at Stephen F. Austin. And Carla and I talked about it, and I said, well, Stephen F. Austin drove up here, they played, they're out, now they have to go home. Maybe we could talk to them and see if they would give us the hotel rooms. So I approached Sue, and she was not happy having lost, but being the good friend that she was, she said, yes, y'all can go check into our hotel rooms. And I said, and could I borrow $200? So things are a little bit different than in terms of women's athletics. But those were good times, and those were times where friendships meant a lot, and you had an appreciation for people who were struggling to do the same things that you wanted to do. Fast forward, I come to the University of Texas, Carla being much smarter, much brighter, and moving into the roles that she had later in her life. I invited her to Austin one weekend, and I lived in the same neighborhood with a woman I'd met in the kinesiology department named Dot Lovett. And I invited Carla down, and we spent a weekend just enjoying Austin and talking about the things that we had experienced and talking about what we're going to do in the future. So I introduced her to Dot. And last week, when I had my first conversation with Dot after Carla passed, Dot said, Carla was my soulmate, and I don't think that I've ever thanked you for introducing us. And I said, well, Dot, that really wasn't my intention, because you never know whether things like that are going to work out or not. She said, well, it obviously worked out. It was more than a weekend. 33 years later. So I think I can take credit for that relationship that's been so wonderful for them and for all of us to see the joy and the happiness that they brought to each other. I think about Carla and how great she was as a basketball player. I always remember, even when I was coaching later on, the hook shot had sort of gone out of vogue, but she was always in my ear. You've got to teach these players to shoot a hook shot. Nobody can guard it. And my response was usually, Carla, they're not going to work at it as hard as you did, so therefore it's not going to be as effective. But all of those times that we spent together and all the remembrances that we have are all shaded by Carla as a person. You're here. How many of you are here? They had to get out more chairs. We may run out of food, because all of you have the same feelings about Carla that I do. A wonderful, brilliant woman who was selfless, who always had the ability to make you and her presence feel like you were the most important person in the world to her. A woman who was so low-key but so dynamic. A woman who did so much for women's sports, and even more than that, to open opportunities for women to be successful and to set an example for the rest of us. I always think about, and I think I said this when I spoke about Carla 3 years ago, Carla was a woman who left the ladder down. She left the ladder down for all of us as women to seek a passion, an ability to make a difference. She left the ladder down so that we could use that ladder to do the same thing, to climb up and to leave it down for the next generation. I know that everyone in this gym appreciates what's happened in women's sports. It wouldn't have happened without Carla Lowry and other women like her. It starts with a burning desire to compete, to do something that you love and to excel, and to reach out to other people who have those same desires and abilities. And I'm asked to speak a lot about women and teamwork. Think about all the young women that are getting to be a part of a team and how those team and those lifelong skills help them be successful. Because I don't care what you do, you need to be competitive, you need to be compassionate, you need to be able to work hard, you need to be able to be a part of a group and to be a leader and to work on a daily basis to create an environment where everyone can enjoy the same kind of success. I think I also quoted Madeleine Albright, who said, "There's a special place in hell for women who don't help other women." But I would say about Carla Lowry, there's a special place in heaven for someone who helps so many other women.
Thank you, Jody. And I was one of those women. So, before we conclude, I would like to thank Southwestern University. I would like to thank President Edward Berger, Vice President Jerry Brody, in particular the staff of the Southwestern University Athletic Department for stepping up. There was no question. She was one of us. As we reach the end of the service, kind of like one of the game shows, behind the curtain, we have a reception set up, and we have memorabilia. We have a slideshow of Carla, and we would like to invite you all to join us. And even though we might run out of food, everybody eat until we run out of food. One final thought is, before we receive the benediction, is that Carla Lowry made this place, this world, a better place. What better legacy can you ask for? Please rise for the benediction.
We have gathered in celebration and in sorrow. Our memories are sweet to our soul, but this day bitter, because we have lost one who loved and was loved. Go forth from this place. Know that we are blessed to be a blessing. We have been blessed by Carla Lowry. Go forth and remember who you are, even as she touched your life, that we might learn the power that love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things. Go forth now. May God's grace, mercy, and peace go with us all. Amen.